There is a river in Maine that still carries the name of the people who lived here before anyone called it Maine. The Sokokis called this land Pequawket, the crooked place. The river still bends the way it always did. The people are gone, and the town built along that river was the payment for their removal. Who ran the machine that erased the nation and cashed out their homeland as a soldier's prize? To understand that, we don't start with the town. We start with the war that made the town possible. Before any colonial soldier reached the Maine interior, this land had a name, and people who gave it one. The Sokokis were not a remnant clinging to a forest edge. At their height, they could call 900 warriors. They built palisade forts 14 feet high, using English carpenters they hired themselves. They sent delegates to treaty councils. They signed their names to legal agreements with colonial governments. They knew every bend in the river they called the crooked place, because it was theirs. The first blow wasn't military. It never is. In 1617 and 1618, epidemic disease swept through the Sokokis with a devastation almost impossible to comprehend. Dead by the hundreds, left unburied, their bones scattered through the forest, found decades later by settlers who had no idea what they were walking through. 900 warriors reduced to a fraction before a single colonial army marched north. They survived. They rebuilt. But the trap was already closing. As colonial settlements pushed up from the coast, the encroachment followed the survivors inland. The Sokokis retreated toward Pequawket, toward the Crooked River, toward the interior heartland that was the last geography entirely theirs. The colonists followed them there too. Then Britain declared war on France, and everything accelerated. The Massachusetts colonial government needed soldiers, needed frontier action, and needed land to pay for all of it. The machine had found its fuel source. By 1702, Sokoki sachems were sitting at the treaty table at Sagadahoc, recognized political parties, named signatories, negotiating peace as sovereign representatives. Their names are in the historical record. In 1713, they signed again at Portsmouth, legal standing, recognized agreements, and the bounty proclamations were running at exactly the same time. This is the moral core of what happened here. The Massachusetts colonial government recognized the Sokokis as treaty parties in one document and issued proclamations offering cash payment for their scalps in another. Parallel policies, by the same government at the same time. The price was $100 per Indigenous scalp. The man they found to run this work was named John Lovewell. Not a soldier, a farmer from Dunstable, Massachusetts, who recognized an opportunity. While the colonial government maintained its formal relationship with the Sokokis at treaty tables, it subsidized private raider companies to do the killing the formal army could not officially claim. Lovewell organized his men and moved north. His second expedition, in the winter of 1724, found a hunting party of 10 Abenaki in the Maine wilderness. He waited until dark. He attacked. He killed all 10, scalped them, and marched back to Boston with the evidence. The colonial government paid out 1,000 pounds. The crowd cheered. The newspapers covered it. Lovewell was celebrated. Then he went back a third time. On May 9th, 1725, Lovewell's company reached the Sokokis' heartland, the Pequawket village at what is now Fryeburg, Maine, 20 miles from the land that would become Harrison. Chief Poggis was waiting. What followed was described as one of the most obstinate and deadly bushfights in the annals of New England. Lovewell was killed. Poggis was killed. When it ended, the surviving colonists retreated south. What remained of the Sokokis community fled north, to Canada, to the mission settlements at St. Francis, to the Abenaki villages in Quebec. The organized Sokokis' presence in the Maine interior was over. In 1736, the Massachusetts General Court issued a first grant for the Sokokis' homeland along the Crooked River. The courts ruled it invalid. So they tried again. On June 15, 1771, 81 years after the battle it was meant to reward, they issued a second grant. Otis Field Plantation, awarded to the heirs of soldiers. 3 moving parts, 1 outcome. Sokokis territory, cleared by epidemic, encroachment, and state-funded scalp raids, distributed as bounty to colonial veterans and their descendants. The deed to what would become Harrison, Maine went to 2 men. One had argued before a Boston court that no government could take a man's property without his consent. The other had just signed those words into the Constitution of the United States. James Otis, Jr. You may know his phrase, taxation without representation. John Adams called his 1761 courtroom argument the birth of American independence. His co-grantee was Nathaniel Gorham, signer of the United States Constitution, President of the Continental Congress. The founding generation's language of liberty and the colonial land bounty machine were not opposites living in separate moral compartments. They were the same transaction, the same hands, the same year. Here is what makes it darker. By 1771, James Otis Jr. was already gone in every meaningful sense. Severe mental illness, politically destroyed years before. He may not have known what was being signed in his name. The grant may have been entirely dynastic, his heirs and the Gorham family moving the colonial bureaucracy to produce a deed Otis himself could no longer claim to understand. The machine didn't need him. It ran itself. It always had. The settlers came in 1792. The plantation was incorporated in 1797. On March 8, 1805, it was set off as its own town, named Harrison after Harrison Gray Otis of Boston, heir to James Otis Jr., a land speculator whose papers document active real estate exploitation of Maine territory. He became a U.S. Senator, Mayor of Boston. His name is still on the town sign, the landlord's name on the door every day. The Sokokis are not a federally recognized nation. They were not parties to the 1980 Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act, which returned land and $81 million to the Penobscot Nation and Passamaquoddy tribe. Their western Abenaki descendants are in Vermont and Quebec. There is no settlement for the Crooked River. The colonial machine closed its books. The river didn't. In summer, kayakers put in at the public launch. Children learn to paddle in water that bends exactly the way it always bent, through land that carries the name of the people who described it 3 centuries before anyone thought to write it on a map. No sign explains what that name means. No marker notes that the town's pleasant name belongs to a Boston land speculator who inherited a deed to territory taken from treaty-recognized people by a government that simultaneously sold their scalps for cash. Pequawket, the crooked place. Someone named it from inside it. Those people were hunted for state money. Their homeland was deeded to men who wrote liberty into American law and did not extend it to them. Every paddle stroke on that river moves through a memorial that nobody marked. The river still bends. It has always known its name. We dig these stories out of Maine's dirt because nobody else is going to. If this one stayed with you, there are more rivers, more names, more town signs nobody stops to question. We'll be back on the next one.